Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I came across a really interesting book. I saw a post just recently on social media about a book about heartbreak. And I really thought it would be kind of interesting to speak with the author and find out a little bit more about this book about heartbreak. Something that all of us go through probably once or twice or more in life. Laura Pratt is our guest tonight. She's a long-term journalist, a writer, and an editor. She writes for Canadian magazines and edits books. Her first memoir, The Fleeting Years, was published in 2004. She lives in Toronto with whichever one of her kids and dogs she can corral, she says, to join her. She's a 2020 graduate of the University of King's College Creative Nonfiction MFA. She won an honorable mention in Prairie Fire's 2020 CNF contest and was shortlisted for the Fiddleheads 2019 CNF contest. She's served as a judge at the National Magazine Awards for several years. And her book that I'm interested in, HeartBroken, is a work of creative nonfiction published this month by Penguin Random House Canada. Laura Pratt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So it's my pleasure. So I understand that this book, HeartBroken, is a bit of a memoir, but also research. How can it be both memoir and research?
Well, I'll tell you how. I am a journalist by trade, and so research comes to me pretty naturally, and I enjoy undertaking big research projects, of which this certainly was one. So the way I've been describing it is as the memoir, which is my story, is the thread that runs through the fabric of an enormous amount of research that comes from every corner you could imagine that has had contact with heartbreak. So science, physiology, history, literature, a lot of poetry about heartbreak, philosophy, a lot of philosophy around heartbreak. So what I've done in this book is I've told my story and let my experiences serve as the jumping off point for deeper explorations of the subject in question. As I said, turning to these various other sources to enrich our understanding of them.
Was the research therapeutic or harmful? To research all the aspects of heartbreak after you've actually suffered one, I would have thought that could have been therapeutic, but it could also have been really harmful.
Well, I guess I could say a little bit of both. A lot of people asked me in the writing of this book, which start to finish took about 5 years. The obvious question everybody asked me was, is it cathartic? Is it therapeutic? Are you better for having done it? And I resisted. It's funny, I resisted saying yes all along until the very end. And now looking back, I guess I'd have to admit that it was. But I think I resisted because I never wanted that to be the rationale. Indeed, I think more than anything, the reason I launched into this book was to spend more time with the subject of my heartbreak. I got to hang out with him for 5 years because I was so immersed in our story. So that was sometimes really, really hard. So there you go. It was a little bit of both in the end.
Sorry, I don't understand. So the subject of your heartbreak, to understand, didn't write it. You had to spend more time with him?
I had to spend more time thinking about the memories of being with this person who broke my heart.
Not with him actually, but no. Thinking about him.
No, not with him actually. I haven't had any trace of him in 9 years. 9 years this month.
So I want to go through a little bit more detail after the break about this, but just simply, I understand this was a long distance relationship that ended all of a sudden or something like this?
Yeah, it ended without warning. It wasn't one of those relationships that so often you hear when a relationship ends, it's sort of back and forth over an extended period. Those couples that they break up and then you think, oh yeah, Mary and Tom are broken up, and then you hear, wait, Mary and Tom are back together again. And then they're broken up again. And it wasn't at all like that. It was he just cut it off, and he lives in Montreal and I live in Toronto, and he just took off, and I never heard another word from him.
Did you get a dear,
No.
not dear John, but a dear Mary or whatever it is letter, or like how did the
Uh,
breakup happen?
No, it happened. I was driving him to get on a train to go back to Montreal at the end of one of our weekends, and he broke up with me in the car. And then I took him into Union Station, and I briefly, caused a scene at Union Station, which provided the opening scene for my book. But
Tell us about that. Tell us about the opening scene.
well, I mean, the opening scene is me chasing him down the stairs at Union Station, having let him get a little bit of a lead on me because I had to go and park the car. And then finding him and chasing him and pleading with him and saying, "What's going on? What? I'm sorry, whatever I did, I'm sorry, please, please." And everybody looking at us, but politely pretending they're not looking at us. But there was no question we were the focus of a lot of attention there in that train station. And but then he left.
So you in the book describe your relationship and the breakup, but then you go into a whole bunch of analysis and research on the breakup. Is this of other breakups, or how breakups happen, or good breakups and bad breakups, or what? Actually, you know what? Hold on that. We're going to take a break for a message, and we're going to come back and ask you all those questions again.
All right. Sounds good.
We're going to be back in 2 minutes with Laura Pratt, the author of Breakup. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Laura Pratt. She is a author of a new book that's just been published called HeartBroken. I called it Breakup before the break. I'm so sorry, but that's what I was thinking about. But it's HeartBroken, which I guess is the result of a breakup. And it's a work of creative nonfiction published this month by Penguin Random House Canada. I presume one can get it either from Penguin Random House Canada or bookstores or online or Amazon or things like that?
Anywhere you can buy a book, you can find this book.
I look forward to reading it. I've read all of your descriptions of it, but I haven't had the pleasure of actually reading the whole book yet. So I'm looking forward to it. So are there good breakups and bad breakups? Is there a good way to break up? Or is there a bad breakup? Because breakups are going to happen.
Breakups are going to happen. I gotta say, you have breakups on the mind, clearly, Brian. This is not so much a book about breaking up as it is a book about heartbreak.
Okay.
And so my various journalistic dives into the subject were into the subject of heartbreak, not breaking up.
Okay.
So
it's not the actual action of ending a relationship, it's how you deal with the aftermath?
Exactly. It's the experience. When I first started out on this book project, I ventured into it initially convinced that it had been done before, because it seemed too obvious to me that no one had ever written a book that just explored the phenomenon of heartbreak and how it affects us and how we make our way to the other side of it. It's the most universal of subjects, but it's also the most personal of subjects. And when I discovered with some delight that nobody had ever explored the subject from a deep research point of view, I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. Because I think that it's useful to read about something that you're going through, something very human that so many other people have gone through. If you think of any subject that is traumatic and that is common to the experience of being alive, I think people find solace in reading about other people's adventures through it, and I think heartbreak is no exception there. I think that it's a comfort to read about, to understand I think if we can understand something, we feel we can manage it better.
And how did you get through it?
I wrote a book about it. Honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think we ever recover from heartbreak. I feel that pretty strongly. The subtitle of my book is Field Notes on a Constant Condition. And the constant piece is quite intentional there, because I don't think we ever really get over heartbreak any more than we ever get over any loss. And life contains a lot of loss.
Did you ever understand what caused it? And if you did or didn't, does that help or not help you figure out and get through the heartbreak?
Well, what caused my heartbreak, was somebody breaking my heart. So it's not so much about the cause of it. It's just about understanding the human experience of it, I think. And that's what I sought to do. And I do think I came away from all of this research with a much stronger grasp on what it is to have a broken heart. And I hope that my book can similarly help other people with broken hearts to feel more in control, less sort of whirling around in pain, and more like they have a handle on the situation.
And how do you do that? If you're not going to write a book about heartbreak, how do you actually handle it better?
Well, you read a book about it. That was my intention. I think that's important, to try and understand it. And I delve into one of the big areas that I spend time on in my book is grief, because grief is obviously a big piece of heartbreak. And there's an awful lot out there about grieving the loss of somebody who died, and I feel like that gets a lot more attention, and people who are in a position where they're grieving a dead person have many more resources to turn to. I think heartbreak gets the short shrift there a little bit. People diminish it and think, oh, well, you can get past that. But look at this person over there. They had somebody die. And, I'm not bringing up this comparison to suggest that their situation is lesser, just to point out
Different.
that heartbreak is is also worthy of our attention.
I was told by your publisher that you talk about some surprises about heartbreak. What surprises about heartbreak did your research reveal?
Well, I think the one that surprised me the most was the discovery that our emotional pain travels the same neural pathways as our physical pain. So you stub your toe, it hurts, you're in pain. Your heart gets broken, it hurts, you're in pain too. I think that discovery, among others, legitimized my pain for me and made me feel less of a loser, like somebody who couldn't rise above this calamity that I'd suffered. The discovery that, in fact, there's a neurological rationale for why I'm feeling pain, and that, in fact, my pain is every bit as real as physical pain, emotional pain. I think that other surprises were sort of in the same realm in terms of physiology and biology, learning that back in the Middle Ages, in the city of London, England, they used to publish every week a list of mortalities, that weekly. It was called the London's Weekly Bills of Mortality, and it was an account every week of everybody who died in the city that week and what they died from. And grief was one of the categories. So every week a certain number of people would die from grief. Now, if we heard that today in 2023, we might scoff at that idea, because honestly, don't ask me how they determined that it was grief, but the fact is that they did. And I think that probably gave those people were dead, but other people suffering grief, learning that one can actually die from it, it legitimizes it in a way that I think extends a certain amount of comfort to the griever.
Well, there's so much talk, lately about trauma, emotional trauma. And I guess that's what, it could be heartbreak, it could be emotional distress, it could be caused by a lot of different things. But when you think about trauma is a pretty physical reaction.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that there's actually a phenomenon. It's called Takotsubo syndrome. And it's the word, which I'm almost certainly mispronouncing, is a reference to a jug, like a water jug in Japan, that has a certain shape, a bulbous shape. And when we suffer something traumatic, like a heartbreak, for some people, your heart takes on that shape and it can kill you. And so there's another physiological
your heart can take on a different shape. Seriously?
Yeah, when you're hit with, if you're slammed with bad news, for some people, their heart actually changes shape, and that change in shape can kill you.
Other than writing a book and or reading a book about heartbreak called HeartBroken, what else do you think people need to do to get over heartbreak?
Well, I mean, for me, I think ultimately, as I said, I don't think we ever really get over it. I think that if you imagine heartbreak as a hole in your heart, a hole in your life, I think that in the past, the common wisdom was, we've got to shrink that hole. But I think more recently, we've come to recognize that we need to build our lives around that hole and learn to live with it. Back in the day, they used to advocate the idea of closure. And it's thanks to Freud that we even talk about closure and getting over things and, being on the other side of things. But I think that was kind of a reckless philosophy to introduce to the world, because people who weren't getting over things started to think they were doing recovery wrong. And I think that it's something that heartbroken people can do, is recognize that they need to build a life for themselves that it no longer features this other person who they yearn for and they miss and feel sad about. So no, it doesn't feature that other person anymore, but they can build a new relationship around that person's absence, where they start to take comfort from their absence, where they used to take comfort from their presence. It's all a little
They
bit.
take comfort from their absence. How does one take comfort from their absence?
Well, I don't mean take comfort like, oh, I'm so glad that guy's not there anymore. I mean, take comfort from the understand, from the memories, from the I guess it's just coming to terms with they're not there anymore, and you're building your life in a way that doesn't need to you don't need to pretend like in the old days, oh, that person's going to one day come back, or I will never see that person again. Either one. You just need to say, this is who I am now. And this is and I had a lot of experiences, and this is part of my life. I mean, I think in the end, the best place to land for somebody who's heartbroken is in an appreciation for the way it expands your emotional repertoire. I believe that strongly. Everybody knows people who've been with one person, their high school sweetheart, whatever, and they've never experienced heartbreak. And while that's fantastic and good for them, I might argue that they don't have as wide a band of emotional experience as people who have gone way up and gone way down. And so, somebody who has had a heartbreak has had their life experience stretched. And if you can learn to have an appreciation for the way your experiences have gone from up to down and you're still here, I think that kind of appreciation can help push you through to the other side.
So you're sort of making the argument about what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
In not as quite a cliched fashion, I guess I am, yeah.
Okay. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Laura Pratt, the author of a new book called HeartBroken, which has been published recently by Penguin Random House Canada. And she says that I've been obsessed with breakup. I'm going to ask her a couple more questions about breakups and being heartbroken and see what else she has to tell us from an advice standpoint. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Laura Pratt. She's a author of a new book called HeartBroken, which is a work of creative nonfiction published by Penguin Random House Canada about being heartbroken. And she says this is not a self-help book. She doesn't want to give us advice on how to deal with breakups and how to deal with being heartbroken. But she says this is a philosophical book about heartbreak and being heartbroken. What is the difference, Laura, between a self-help book and a philosophical book about heartbreak?
Well, I mean, right from the get-go, there's books out there already that are like, take a warm bath and light some scented candles, and that there's no shortage of advice for people who are feeling low. That was never my intention. My intention, if there's anything that I believe I'm ultimately helping people with this book, because my intention was, as you said, a philosophical contemplation of the experience, because I think, as with everything in life, if we can understand it, we can manage it. But beyond that, I think the best thing I can offer people with this book, and I really hope readers and anybody who has any experience with this book come away with, is that I think too often people who are heartbroken are not treated well. I don't think that there's a lot of welcoming feelings for people who are wandering around in the doldrums of heartbreak. I think more often than not, we're told to get on with it. We're told, people say, you're still thinking about him? Like, get over it. And it's characterized as a weakness, I think. And I hope that people read memoir because they want to see themselves in it, and they want to see, if they're struggling with a problem, how did this person get past it? Because maybe there's something in there that I can apply to my own.
I agree, but isn't that self-help?
It is. I guess I'm saying that the self-help of my book is less intentional and is more sort of global and holistic, because what I hope people walk away with, I hope people are easier on the heartbroken and don't have such high expectations. Everybody goes through heartbreak at their own rate, at their own pace. And Emily Dickinson, the poet, wrote, I measure every grief I meet with narrow, probing eyes. I weigh, I can't remember the line. I want to weigh it to see if it has the same weight as mine, because we're all interested in knowing how other people go through a hardship. And And I just want people to know that it's okay to still be heartbroken. I mean, as I said, it's been 9 years for me.
You're still heartbroken.
And I'm still heartbroken. I will never not be heartbroken. How could I not be? It was a great big love. It's going to be a great big aftermath. And that's okay. That's okay. There's actually biological markers. Some people experience grief at higher levels and for longer periods than other people because they have a certain makeup, a certain physiological makeup. So I don't know if I can blame my long heartbreak on that. I don't even know if you could be tested for that, but that I just want people to know that it's okay to still be heartbroken. It's okay. Everybody's dragging some grief behind them, especially by the time you've reached a certain stage in life, everybody's dragging a grief behind them. This is just my grief. I just want people to be okay with their heartbreak and to be comfortable with it. As I said, like to just be comfortable with the absence of the person, to be comfortable with an understanding of what they're going through.
So you don't teach closure. You don't teach getting over it. You just say comfortable with.
Yeah, I don't like the word closure because remember that author, that scientist, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote On Death and Dying, and she nominated 5 stages of acceptance for people who are dying, and that was later applied to grief. And with it's like depression and denial and bargaining, and the final stage is acceptance. And she later, on her deathbed, actually, she recanted that and said that she wished she'd never set that out there for people because people felt if they couldn't get to acceptance, that there was something wrong with them. And that's what I want people to know in reading my book, that there's nothing wrong with them. They're human, and there's nothing beyond that. They're simply human. And all society and all those people out there who are bearing down on the heartbroken and saying, you got to get over it. There's something wrong with you. I want those people to take a step back and realize there's nothing wrong with any of us. Everybody's just getting through it, and it's incredibly, intensely difficult to get through, but we're just doing the best we can.
So you described the opening part of your book is the scene where you're running after the subject of your heartbreak in Union Station. Do you talk more about in your book about your relationship or more about your dealing with heartbreak?
Heartbreak.
So you don't spend more time talking about him and what the relationship was about.
No, only to support the story of heartbreak. It's not a book about my relationship. It's a book about my experience of heartbreak and more broadly the experience of heartbreak.
So other than the story of Union Station, is there another story you can share with us about your relationship with heartbreak?
Well, my relationship with heartbreak, I what other story could I share? I mean, it's ongoing. It's years ago I wrote an essay for the Globe and Mail about heartbreak, and it attracted a whole bunch of furious responses, like angry people. It makes people angry if you don't just have a tidy recovery from heartbreak for some reason. And some of the comments in response to that essay were awful. People were saying, I was a loser, and I would have left her too. One guy wrote me a song, so that was unusual. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's my experience with heartbreak is an enduring one, and I think my family and friends have come to just understand that that's just part of
life,
my makeup now. That's who I am. I mean, everybody has stories that help to build them into the people they become. This was a big part of my life story.
What do you think is misunderstood about heartbreak? Is it this, that some people don't get over it and they live with it?
I think what's misunderstood is that people think that everybody does get over it.
And some people don't.
But some people simply don't. Some people don't. And for some people, it lasts an awfully long time. Way back when, Queen Elizabeth I, lady in waiting, she died, and they did an autopsy on her, and she died shortly after her brother died in the war. And when the doctor looked at her heart, it had these sort of fibers and strings all over it, and he declared that she had died from heartbreak. So it's been ever thus, that heartbreak brings us down, and people turn away from it and think, it's a trivial experience, and you can climb on top of it, but sometimes you can't.
And so is that what you hope the world does in adjusting to heartbreak, that it accepts heartbreak to a greater degree and that it can last longer?
I think that the world could do it, the heartbroken among us, a favor by just being kinder and less judgmental about heartbreak, because I do think that people who are feeling sad and missing somebody, it's easy to feel like a sense of weakness, or that you're a lesser human because you are dragging this sadness around behind you. So that would be the most wonderful development, is if people could have more patience and more compassion for the heartbroken among us.
If people could have more patience and compassion for the heartbroken among us.
Yeah. That's my goal in life.
So I want to ask you a question. I'm not sure how to ask this. I think that in relationships, and I don't want to ask you self-help, so I'm going to try hard not to make this a self-help question. I apologize. But in some situations, in breakups, when people are heartbroken, the person that is at fault may still be heartbroken, but there's a lot less sympathy for that person than the person that's not at fault.
No, I think that's an interesting point to make. And in fact, I did uncover some research on precisely that I covered in my book, that when there's a heartbreak, both hearts break. It's a different experience, no question, depending on what side of the divide you're on. But the other person could be feeling guilty. I think the other person, if they're a caring person, and if they in fact loved the other person, there's no question that they're probably feeling pretty miserable as well. So I think that that's worth contemplating.
So does the person that caused the heartbreak deserve sympathy and understanding, compassion too, or no? They should be saying, "Oh no, they're a blank," and like just kick them to the side of the road.
They get a little, not as much as the one whose heart they broke. But I do think that it is a thoughtful consideration to make, that the other person, it doesn't get away scot-free.
That's interesting. And again, without getting into the self-help stuff, but lots of people talk about the eat, pray, love, or going on a trip, or changing sort of your environment. Did any of those things work for you, or did you not even try them? You just...
No, I don't think I was on a mission to get over my heartbreak. I think I was learning to live with my heartbreak. And I think I have now. I think
are you a better person, a more interesting person, a stronger person, because you've learned to live with your heartbreak? So some people just sort of shut it and never deal with it at all, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what I was alluding to when I said your emotional repertoire is wider. I think it makes you a more interesting person. I mean, we all know people who have gone through hardships, and they're probably more interesting inherently than the people who've had a fairly narrow, predictable life. So, if there's any positive spin that you can find on heartbreak, it might be that you're a more interesting person. I like to think that because you've been dragged to the bottom of the ocean, and you've come out the other side. You're still here to talk about it. So yeah, let's say that. I think that's the upside of heartbreak, is that you're more fun at parties.
You're more fun at parties talking about the heartbreak or talking about how you got over it. I'm going to take a break in just a second, but before I go there, what was The Fleeting Years about?
The Fleeting Years is about my kids. I have 4 kids, and they were letters I wrote to my kids when they were born and when they were little.
Sounds wonderful. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with some concluding comments with Laura Pratt, the author of a new book called HeartBroken, just published this past month. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I had a really interesting chat tonight with Laura Pratt, who is the author of a book called HeartBroken. It's not a self-help book. I keep on trying to push her to some self-help things, trying to get her to give me the 10 steps to getting over it. And she doesn't. And I guess part of it is that she firmly believes that this philosophical book, this philosophical contemplation of heartbreak, is actually a helpful thing to contemplate and go through. The book is called HeartBroken. It's published by Penguin Random House. You can buy it online at Amazon or in bookstores and things like that. Laura, I got to ask you, what do you hope your book accomplishes? What do you think your book on heartbreak might do for heartbroken readers?
What I hope more than anything is that people will be able to see themselves in my story. And people who are feeling heartbroken will feel less alone. I think that when you have heartbreak, you feel incredibly isolated because the person you loved rejected you, and you're suddenly quite alone in the world. And you probably aren't. You have friends and family, and you probably aren't. But this essential figure in your life has turned their back on you. And I hope that, as I said, when people read memoir, they're looking to find a way through an experience by reading about somebody else's route through an experience. And that's really what I hope my book does for people, is make them feel less alone.
Make people feel less alone.
Yeah.
Are you going to write another book? What's the next book on?
I think my next book will be a heartbreak adjacent book. It'll be about my kids leaving home, because I'm ready to write about my kids again, and I'm an empty nester and a single parent, and so it'll be. I guess I'll develop a reputation as somebody who's fixated on heartbreak.
Well, given the what I told you about my own personal situation, I almost would like to read the book from the man's point of view, and understand how he feels about the whole situation. And
he is welcome to write it. He is welcome to do whatever he wants to do. I haven't heard from him, but if he wants to write a book,
I think that'd be kind of interesting, and compare the two. Laura Pratt, author of HeartBroken, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
That's our show for tonight. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Bloor West Village at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining me.